In the modern world, leader in any business has got to have different approaches. People don't just do what the boss says anymore because he says it. They'll respect the authority, but then you've got to get people to buy into what you're trying to do. Different approaches, flexible approach to leadership is really important.
Gareth Southgate is about to lead England into a third major tournament. And only Sir Alf Ramsey has a better record. But is Southgate the man to end 56 years of hurt? We've spoken to the people who've shaped his journey through football.
We was at Crystal Palace as young aspiring footballers to, chasing a dream of where we're going to get to in our careers. There was a trip in Italy and I was always a little bit lively, a little bit polar opposite from Gareth, and he was always a bit quiet and probably a little bit more intelligent than the rest of the group. Then we were just paired up together in a room, the rest as our friendship's history.
He was focused, worried about other people, good with his teammates, and he'd just been released from Southampton, so he was on a little bit of a down, but met his mum and dad, and we thought at Palace we were taking players that had been released from Chelsea, Southampton, other clubs, because we just started our youth system, and Gareth was one of the early entries.
I know that his parents were really big on him going to staying on at school, maybe going to university. I think they saw the pitfalls and the reality of how hard it is to make it as a professional footballer. And I think that was quite realistic, his parents, at that time. He was super intelligent. Back in the day at the training ground, we had a quiz machine brought in. You could win £20, which back then was like a week's wages to us. He'd be on it every day at the end of training, and he'd be taking the £20 out literally every day. In the end, they took it out because he was making no money.
It was such a tough environment. We were a South London club. We took a lot of players from non-league. We had people like Andy Gray, Ian Wright, Mark Bright. I could go on, Jeff Thomas, John Pemberton. It was a tough group, and if you couldn't survive in that, and Gareth described it sometimes as a bear pit, and it was. Cold showers, running up hills, training was hard. It was a real test of whether you could survive. We went and played the British Army, and we lost 3-0. Gareth captained the team. He was around about 17. And we hadn't quite decided, or I had, by the way, but we hadn't quite decided as a club whether we were going to take him on. And after the game, when I looked out, and I had the players back in, I said, well, where's Gareth? And I was just about to give everybody a rollicking. When I looked out, he was shaking hands with everybody. And he came in about 5 minutes later. I said, Gareth, where have you been? He said, look, the army guys have invited us back for a quick drink. Let's go and have something to eat and a beer, and I wanted to say congratulations, thanks for that. In a state of fury, I got him in the next day, and he needed toughening up. He didn't really see the hardness of being a professional. I just sat him down. I was quite tearful. He thought I was going to give him the bullet as well, I think. And I actually just said to him at the time, Gareth, do yourself a favour, become a travel agent, because you've got no chance of making it as a footballer. He
was my best pal, and if I wasn't pulling my weight or I wasn't doing my job properly, as much as we was mates, he would tell me, I'm not good enough, I'm not accepting that. And that was as much as a friend trying to say up your game as it was a captain.
I think his road has been quite strange as we're sitting in this house now. He's been back here, he's grown up. When he was 16, he'd come back and with other players and do jobs in the garden to make up their YTS money. I don't think they realise the long route he's had to actually get where he has.
When I got released from Crystal Palace, it was literally like the last 2 or 3 days of the season. It was very difficult for me to get a club or go on trial. But a week after that, Exeter City had a couple of games, and the season finished. Gareth had just lifted the Championship trophy to get to the Premiership, and he come in the week after to work with me on my own to make sure I was ready to go on trial to Exeter. And that, for me, always sort of sums him up. If you'd have said to me when we was younger, do you think he'd be England manager? No, but I definitely thought he'd be a manager for sure.
I had an idea of what type of player I'd be looking for in the long term for Aston Villa, and that would be someone who played for the under-21 international sides, someone who had 100 or more league games under his belt. Gareth had stuck in my mind even as a midfield player. I'd obviously knew Then on that, he played right back a few times as well. So he was genuinely one of the targets, one of the first targets that I identified for Villa. Signed him predominantly thinking, yeah, he would play in midfield. I'm not sure how or why he ended up going back to centre-back. I know he played centre-back in one of the games, and Alan Evans, John Gregory and myself just looked at each other and went, whoa, that'll do. And in fairness to Gareth, he played with the man himself, Paul McGrath, who was, just brilliant. Hugo Ekiog, God bless him, who was a wonderful football player. We played Gareth on the left side of the three, and he just settled in.
Villa finished 4th in Southgate's first season, and they won the League Cup. That form led to an England debut.
On comes Southgate for his first cap. Southgate becomes the 40th player used by Terry Venables.
And a place in the squad for Euro 96.
Terry, lads, this way please, thank you. Ironically, the day of the game, I remember saying to him, it was a joke, come on mate, there's like 20 million people relying on you tonight. I remember saying, yeah, no pressure, cheers mate, and then off to the game. And I went to the game that night with his wife, Alison. Obviously then it went to penalties, and I just remember his wife saying, oh no, Gareth's taking one. I didn't feel like he'd miss, I've got to be honest, I didn't even think he'll miss.
There's no question that the things that you go through in life shape your character.
Someone said to me a long while ago, what doesn't destroy you completely only makes you stronger. He'll find that. He said to him he's got a week to cry and he's got to get back in the game again.
I saw him straight after, and he'd literally faced every interview. And he said, look, I'm not going to shy away from it. I've missed the penalty. I'm going to, make sure I speak to every journalist. They know that, I'm standing there. And I'm going to front it up, and he did. I know it hurt him, it would hurt anyone, and I think the way he dealt with it was really, really good. We was on holiday, and there'd be people pointing, and wherever he went, it was like a shadow around him for a little while. But Gareth, being Gareth, he kind of just dug deep, and that's what always makes me laugh when people say, has he got this steel in him? Yeah, you can't come through that and not have steel.
We didn't have to dwell on it at all, no. He really knuckled down straight away to what we needed to do. It's an event that he's handled unbelievably well.
Southgate put that miss behind him. He made an FA Cup final with Villa in 2000 before leaving the next year.
I want to come and improve myself as a player, and I believe with the coaching staff here that will certainly be the case.
He was given the captain's armband pretty much straight away when he first arrived. You could see the minute he walked in that he was someone that was a real thinker, somebody who was very thoughtful, very considered when he spoke.
What walked in was a leader, but he's not a leader that shouts and screams. But he'll coax, cajole, do whatever's needed to try and get the best out of people and as players. I think they were the traits that Steve McLaren paid for. I mean, it was a decent fee at the time, but I think when you look back, it was money very well spent.
Southgate won the League Cup again in 2004.
After 128 years of hurt, Middlesbrough claimed silverware.
And in 2006, after 638 club games, his final appearance came in the UEFA Cup final defeat to Sevilla. But his next move came as a shock.
I was sat on holiday and he phoned me, and I didn't take a lot of convincing to make that decision.
Can you tell us whereabouts you are with your coaching qualifications?
It's a shame for me that obviously that's overshadowing everything. I'm committed to getting the qualifications as quickly as I can.
It was a bit of a surprise. We knew obviously that Steve McLaren was going. It was at the World Cup 2006. I got a call from Steve Gibson, the chairman, to say that he was going to give the job to Gareth, and what did you think? And she said, well, if you're going to give it to anyone at the club that's existing, he's, as a player that wanted to get into management, he's the perfect choice.
The mark of the man is that the players took to it. It was never going to be easy because you're going from when you walk out on a training pitch every day and everything's laid out and you've got the organisation and the manager speaks and tells you how the session's going to look, and you're going from receiving that information to have to give that information. I think in the initial instance was just a manager of men, and that didn't change. I think the relationship from leaving the dressing room is really difficult, because once you leave the dressing room you are detached from that, but you were only there a week ago.
Maybe looking back at it, personnel changes too quick too soon But I think he took it all in his stride and he did the best he possibly could with the experience or limited experience he had. For a large part of it, I think he did it very, very well. I remember talking to him about it a couple of years afterwards and him saying that in hindsight, I wish I'd played another year, fulfilled my player's contract. But he goes, the problem is the job offer was too big to turn down. He's thinking, well, if I don't take it now, will I ever be offered this job ever again? He had to sacrifice that year's playing to go into management.
After 2 mid-table finishes, Southgate suffered a setback. Middlesbrough were relegated from the Premier League.
I remember a conversation with Steve Gibson at the end of the season, and obviously Steve was pretty angry, and rightly so. There was myself, Gareth, Gordon McQueen was still on the staff at that particular time. He said, I've got 3 centre-halves sat round this table and we can't keep the ball out of our goal from set plays. And we kind of looked and you can only look at the chairman and go, yeah, you're right. At that particular point, some of the players that come in weren't good enough. It became a big struggle, and to lose that Premier League status, I know, really hurt.
He kept his job, but in October, with the team a point off top spot, Southgate was sacked.
It was a massive shock. I was driving home and I had to stop the car. I was like, really? It would have been a really tough decision for Steve, because I know how highly Steve regards Gareth. Things like that hurt. He'd given up his career, his football career, which could have lasted until 40, no problem. To do it, to have a go, and that had been agreed, so that's fine. So that door closes, this door opens, and you carry on with that. We all have to fail to succeed, but yeah, I know it hurt him. I hurt him a lot.
In January 2011, Southgate made his next move. He was appointed head of elite development by the FA.
We had a real rapport, and I said, would you be interested in helping us out with the academies? Because he was a face they all knew with England and whatever, and so he did a lot of good work and helped me with that. And that's when, we were thinking, can we get the teams, the England teams, playing that way? He knew what we wanted to do, and he said that's the only way we're going to get the England teams over the line.
He left that role in 2012, but a year later, Southgate was back in the FA as England under-21s manager. The St George's Park era was just beginning, and Southgate would play a crucial role in shaping England's DNA.
We're an island that has certain attributes which some of the rest of the world look at with envy, but we've also got to recognise that we've got to look elsewhere for certain skills and look at not just different countries but different sports.
He said, I can't ever imagine that you'd manage to get this. And he said it's fantastic. It is just what is needed. So I said, I think it is going to be, but we need the right people here. And I said, I think under 21s downwards, you get everyone playing that way and you're helping bring in the coaches and whatever. The whole philosophy appealed to him, and I knew he would make a success of it.
I got a call asking whether I would be interested in assisting Gareth for the first of his under-21 matches. One game then became, I suppose the rest is history, if you like. We are friends. It's gone beyond, the experiences we've had, we'll share forever. I think first and foremost, the relationship works on the football point of view. Gareth is a guy who has amazing strengths, but one of the great strengths he has is his understanding of his weaknesses also, because nobody's perfect, and I think we balance quite well in that respect. And I'm fortunate enough to have a head coach who's intelligent enough and also not as big an ego to identify that.
He's got a link and a unity with players that I don't think any England manager has had ever, because that spell of doing the under-21s downwards, he got to know them well, and now he can ring up, I think, any of them, because they have a rapport with him and they trust him and they enjoy working with him.
In the summer of 2016, the landscape of English football looked bleak. Iceland knocked them out of the European Championships. Sam Allardyce lasted just one game as manager after an off-field scandal. The FA turned to Southgate as interim boss.
Things happened so quickly. It was a moment to step up and put myself forward as the leader of this group.
So why didn't Gareth throw his hat in the ring? I think was at the time, he just felt that he might not have been ready and saw once again the poisonous atmosphere. But I think generally he's a self-critical individual. I just thought he felt maybe I'm not right, maybe it's not quite right for me yet, and was happy to stay on as under-21 manager. And then events unravelled, and we needed a New England manager after about 40 days of appointing Sam. We persuaded him this time that he would be, he is the right candidate. I think he'd seen a bit of how the England team had been organised, probably felt he could bring something to it, and we offered it to him on an interim basis, which is sort of never the conversation you quite want if you're a manager. I always felt was the right person for the job initially. Really pleased that we could persuade him to do it, and it was the starting point of I think a really successful journey that he's been on for himself and the country.
Gareth felt the responsibility of, he was the 21s coach with experience in management. I think he felt it was definitely the right thing to do to help to try to navigate that period. So 4 games it was originally. Across those 4 games you could see him gradually, I think, starting to feel that, yeah, this was something that I would like to do. I don't think he would have done that automatically at the start of that period had he not been really clear on how that was going to look. Because at the time, frankly, it wasn't perhaps as attractive a proposition as perhaps it would look to some coaches now.
I don't think any job is impossible. Some jobs are more difficult than others, some are more complex. This is certainly one of those. There's great interest for everybody. That comes with great responsibility, but I'm ready to embrace that.
He has a great relationship with us all. The best thing about it is, well, I've played through every age group, 16, 17s, 18s, 19s, 20, 21s, to the seniors, so the pathway is there. And if you see the squad now, the pathway is, it's always open for people to come up, and I think that gives the younger age groups motivation, and to see that end product of being in the England senior setup. And I think the manager's done brilliant by having that open pathway.
We were trying to build a system at St George's Park to make sure that England played, men and women teams, played better in tournaments consistently, harness all the best that was in English football, of which there's a lot, but have to do things a bit differently. And we wanted someone that, if that's to be successful, to both be successful in their own right, but also pass it on eventually, because they all go, to a successor who's got a whole history of here's how things get done, here's what we've learned. Whereas what it used to be with the England management sort of merry-go-round was sort of, they never learnt off one another, they get fired always, and it was starting from ground zero, and that wasn't what a lot of the other successful World Cup winning countries did. So it was very important that we had a builder in Gareth. It's interesting, his contract, when we gave it to him, he didn't need to qualify for the World Cup. So we were quite deliberate about that, saying, look, we want you to build for the future. So if you're going to invest in youth, we need to give you the freedom to experiment, get a few things wrong. I thought he managed that transition really well.
We've been going into tournaments worrying about what might happen. A little bit, I think, sometimes as players we've forgotten about actually going to try and win.
That night against Colombia, was there some exercising of the demon? I think it's fair to say probably there was. We've done quite a bit of work within the organisation anyway on this, looking beyond not just the kick, but everything that the penalty shootout was about, how long it was from the final whistle till the first penalty, for example, which half of the pitch, which position on the pitch, so many different parts to that create a familiarity and a confidence, because it's an unusual set of circumstances. It's not a position that players are in often.
Looking back at when we first met, I cannot escape and I cannot forget. Southgate, you're the one, you still turn me on, football's coming home again.
With Southgate mania in full swing back home, England saw off Sweden in the quarter-finals, but they fell short against Croatia.
I'm remarkably proud of a group of players that have really advanced. I think the reaction of the supporters to them at the end, compared to 2 years ago, tells them experiences with England can be positive.
If you think about the shift in sentiment from Iceland in 2016 to Russia 18, it was not just the results about Russia, it was the way the team showed up, turned up, communicated with the public and the fans, etc., etc. So it wasn't just about Gareth. Gareth is the totemic face of it, and well, more than that, but it was more of a total rebuilding project about building belief in the national team, having players that wanted to play
and for the country, and saw value in it.
The environment that he creates in general around the players does help for them to want to come. It's bizarre because normally we have a scenario where a lot of the players play better for their clubs than they do for the country, but in actual fact there are some examples at the moment where perhaps that is the other way around. It's a consequence of work of a lot of people, frankly, that are in the support team. But also I think when you're talking about culture, the leader is so important in that. Gareth's 24/7, 365, just behaviours and decisions, I think, set that culture that the players enjoy being part of.
I love going away with the lads. I think you have a great time. Winning games is even better. But that team spirit, that togetherness we have around the building, the manager's got that environment where he wants us to enjoy it. When we're having downtime, relax, enjoy it. But when we work properly. I think he said that in interviews, and I think we do that really well as a group.
After Russia came a Nations League semi-final, before England turned their attentions to the pandemic-delayed Euro 2020.
There's always a chance to make history. That's the challenge for us as a group of staff, but especially for the players. They shouldn't be burdened by that. We know it's been a long time since England have had that sort of success. We're in a final and we're here to win. Now we want to go and bring the trophy home for everybody. The players have had an incredible togetherness and spirit, which I think has brought so many parts of our country together. They should be, and I think they are, incredibly proud of what they've done.
He was the ideal person to be the manager that day because of what he'd been through in his own football life. Nobody could have done that better than Gareth, but I still think that was another learning curve. If you knew Gareth well enough, you'd probably say, yeah, that was going to happen.
It has been an extraordinary period in our football history. I think it will be when he's dead, when 3 more have had a go in 20 years, whatever, before this period is reflected on, probably with the way that it should.
Southgate's tournament record is outstanding, but his ability to talk candidly on sensitive topics has won him many admirers.
For some of them to be abused is unforgivable, really.
They are the visible face of the Football Association, so the values of that individual have got to be strong, and they've got to be consistent, and they've got to be things that, values that both inspire but also make you feel that you can totally rely on them. Character and personality, was a very important criteria. Gareth was able to demonstrate through his track record, his history, his demeanour, to be able to do that.
Since reaching that final, England under Southgate have hit a rocky patch. It's 6 games without a win going into the World Cup, and a 4-0 home defeat to Hungary brought chants of you don't know what you're doing.
I've got to accept there's going to be a huge amount of noise. There has been around individual selections, team selections, but if I'm going to be a wishy-washy, change my mind, not stick to what I think is right and gives us the best chance of winning, then it's pointless me doing it.
The first blip you've had in 6 years, isn't it? Where you've 6 games without a win.
Yeah, we're not enjoying it. If you've gone a few games without a win when you're the England national team, it's fair to expect criticism. I don't think any of us have an issue with that. This has been different. The calendar is the calendar now. There are no friendlies in this period. It's Nations League. It's the top 8 teams in Europe. So the context to that line of not 1 in 6 is a little bit different to normal. He's the only England manager that's played Nations League games for a start. We made a decision in the summer that players that had a long season, we don't play players that we don't think we should play because there's a physical issue. Gareth felt that we needed to share those minutes across the games. It's a really fine balancing act. So we have some pressure now as a consequence of those matches. We have to manage that, and we will. When we lose, we analyse ourselves first and foremost. I haven't worked with anybody who does that more than he does. We want to win. We know we've gone close. Semi-final, final. It's pretty clear the next challenge.
England now head to the Middle East with a manager whose determination and optimism have shaped his own footballing journey.
I think if you're a coach, it's a bit like being a parent. You've gone past the moment where it's about you and it's about what you pass on to others. When you're the England manager, you have the opportunity to bring happiness to so many millions of people. You have the opportunity to do the opposite as well, by the way, but you do have the opportunity to make people create memories, and most importantly for your players to try to create the best version of them as a group and the best of them individually that they can hope to have.